As some vaccine makers reach the finish line, others are stumbling in the final stretch. GSK and Sanofi now say their vaccine will not be available until the end of the year. AstraZeneca is tinkering its dosage. It's also teaming up with Russia to find out how its vaccine works in combination with the Sputnik 5 shot as well. U.S. Health Secretary Alex Azar says the Sanofi-GSK delay won't affect how many Americans are vaccinated by early next year. But what about other countries? This chart, take a look here, shows some countries have more than enough doses on order. Canada, the US and the UK, as you can see, lead the way. But there are very few developing nations in this top 10. The People's Vaccine Alliance says that rich countries are basically hoarding the vaccines, leaving the developing world behind. Anna Marriott is health policy advisor for Oxfam Great Britain, one of the organizations that makes up the alliance. She joins us live now from the Isle of Wight. Anna, thank you so much for being with us. So now that you have a lot of developed countries, I should say, with access to this vaccine, the US approval is imminent in this country. The UK, they just approved earlier this week. What does that mean for developing countries? Why are they getting left behind in this, do you think?
So I think the first thing to say is that it's fantastic news that the vaccine is becoming available in some of the countries worst affected, like the UK and the US. But it's really important that we start paying attention to supply for the rest of the world, and we do have a significant problem there. The People's Vaccines Alliance has looked at the data of vaccine deals that have been made across the globe, and we find that unless urgent action is taken by both governments and pharmaceutical corporations, 9 in 10 people in the poorest countries are going to miss out on a vaccine to the end of 2021. And I think the problem is twofold. Firstly, not enough vaccines are actually being made, and secondly, as you say, rich countries are buying up the vast majority of those that are available next year. And to fix that, this doesn't have to be a competition between vaccinating people in the US or the UK in competition with people in Pakistan or Nigeria, for example. We can fix this if we fix the supply problem. And to do that, pharmaceutical corporations need to share their vaccine science and know-how and technology so that more manufacturers can get on board. We can upscale that production and if you like, flood the world with safe, cheap and effective vaccines.
When you have this situation whereby the likes of Canada have bought enough dosage to basically vaccinate their populations, as you guys say, 5 times over. But then poorer countries like Pakistan and Nigeria, where I'm actually from, don't have enough. In fact, you say that 9 out of 10 people in developing countries will not have access to the vaccine at all. When you have that kind of chasm between the rich and the poor, what does that do to the economic disparities between developed and developing nations?
Well, we're already seeing just such huge economic fallout in those countries. We're also seeing poverty levels rise for the first time in 20 years. We're seeing hunger rise. Some market analysts, I believe, are predicting that we're going to see a boost to the global economy to the tune of 2% GDP, well, in countries like the US and the EU. But when you dig deeper into their analysis, you see that it rests on an assumption that we do have global access to a vaccine everywhere. And in fact, if you're a business leader, for example, and you imagine a scenario where we have mass protection in some of the richest countries, but only very partial protection in some of the poorest countries, if you're a global retailer dependent on a global supply chain, then does that look like economic recovery? I'm not sure it does. If you're an airline dependent on flights across the globe, but only able to fill flights between a handful of rich countries, I think you'd also question whether that is an economic recovery. So I think as well as continuing deep economic damage in some of the poorest countries in the world, unless we get a people's vaccine available to everybody, that global economic crisis is going to continue for years.
Yeah, you make a good point. The world is so interconnected that clearly there will be a domino economic effect, regardless of whether the countries are rich or poor. So the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine, they've actually come out and said when their vaccine is approved, when it's ready, they have actually pledged that they will use the vaccine. I think more than 60% of their vaccine dosage will go to developing nations, will go to poorer countries. How much of a step is that in the right direction, do you think? I mean, obviously, the Pfizer vaccine is already approved in some countries. It might take a while to get the Oxford AstraZeneca one, but surely it is a move in the right direction.
Yes, and I think if you compare that to corporations like Pfizer and Moderna, who have reserved virtually all of their supplies for rich countries, AstraZeneca does stand out as a company that has made more effort under the conditions set on it by Oxford University to expand supply, to expand the technology to other manufacturers, and that is definitely a good thing. But if you look at the supply that they're able to get to 2021, they're still only able to cover around 18% of the global population. We think that AstraZeneca too and Oxford University too should share their technology. No one company can get us to global access. So if we share that vaccine science and know-how, more manufacturers can get on board. We can scale up the production as quickly as possible and get our public health recovery and our economic recovery back on track as quickly as possible.
Right, so as you say, it's all about sharing the intellectual property. Anna Leifers there, thank you so much. Appreciate you being with us.